Oop's wife and son blame him for oldest son's death. I am not Oop. Oop is Far Cry 212. Original December 7, 2022. 10 years ago my oldest son started a job working the graveyard shift. He was 20 years old. He was having trouble staying awake on his drive home from work in the mornings, so he came to stay with me because I lived closer to his job. He had 2 weeks before he moved into his new apartment real close to his job. After about 4 days if I'm staying with me, I forgot about him having trouble staying awake on his drive home in the morning. I had gotten an all-inclusive tickets to a baseball game and I was taking my youngest son and all his friends. When I came home from work that day I was excited about the game and I wasn't thinking. I woke up my oldest son out and asked him if he wanted to go to the game. He looked at me crazy and then got up to go to the restroom without saying anything. His mother walked in at that time and saw him and said, "Boy, what are you doing up?" My son replied, "Some fool woke me up." We went to the game and that next morning when I was at work at 8:17 a.m. my son had fallen asleep and went head-on into an 18-wheeler and killed. My wife and youngest son knew about me waking him up and they held it against me. Within 2 years my son had moved off for college and my wife had divorced me. For 10 years I've been living with this debilitating guilt and self-loathing. It has ruined my life. I'm on medications for severe depression and PTSD. I lost my business, my house, my wife, both my sons, my health and my dog. I sit here 10 years later still suffering from that eventful day. Every day I hear the words, "Some fool woke me up." Every day I see his burned up body and images in my head. I recently wrote this article for another sub and got a lot of good advice. I haven't seen or talked to my wife and son but a handful of times in the past 10 years. I'm thinking about confronting them even now that I'm divorced and my son is married with a kid that I've never met. I need some type of closure so I can finally heal. How do I confront them and try to get them back in my life? Or should I just let sleeping dogs lie? I really miss younger son and want to be a part of my granddaughter's life. Relevant comments from Oop. Yes, I spent several years in counseling and saw a psychiatrist. It helped some but the depression always came back. I have learned to live with it but I want my son back in my life. I'm not sure how to do it. I have messaged him dozens of times in past years. When I found out about medical school. When I found out he got married. When I found out he bought a house. Had a child and on and on. He never answers me back. Update the 1st of December 11, 2022. In my original post I mentioned that my son has barely spoken to me in 10 years. Reading the overwhelmingly positive comments from Reddit I decided I was going to pursue mending those fences. One comment suggested that I write a letter and that's what I did. This is basically what I wrote. Dear kiddo, I cannot begin to tell you how incredibly proud I am of you for the man you have become. A father could not ask for more in a son. Considering that we have been through something that no one should ever have to go through. I am so happy that you have pushed through and are living your best life. I'm writing you to let you know that I have also pushed through, forgiven myself, and I'm going to start living my best life also. Enough pain has been caused by something I could not control. It kills me that I have missed so many important milestones and events in your life. I don't want to miss anymore. I am very happy that you are coming to your Aunt Carol's for Christmas. I hope that we get a chance to talk and to hopefully resolve some of the issues that have kept us apart. I miss you more than anything in this world. I miss taking off early from work and meeting you on the basketball court, the volleyball court, the football field, and the soccer field, just us and the boys. You have always been the cause of the happiest days of my life. I pray that we can fix this. I can't wait to meet your wife, your stepson, and my granddaughter. And I can't wait to finally see you again. Love, Dad. Well, Reddit, I hope that it opens an avenue into reconciliation. It's a start. The only possibly bad thing. I also just heard my ex might also be coming. Comment from Oop. I sent the letter already. He should have it by now. I wouldn't and haven't tried any type of manipulation on him. I love him too much for that. I pray he is ready to talk in 2 weeks. Update the 2nd of December 26, 2022. I haven't seen my son or my ex-wife for years. Since the last time I saw my son, he has gotten the girl, got married, bought a house, and had a baby. They have blamed me for my son's death for the past 10 years. The party at my sister's house for Christmas was the first chance I have had to see him or her. To say I was nervous is an understatement. I could barely think straight. I arrived early at my sister's with my mom and aunt in tow. We helped prepare the food and arrange the gifts. My wife showed up a little early as well. She walked into the house and hugged everybody and then looked over at me and nodded. I nodded back. My son was running late because they were driving 5 hours. I went outside and sat on the porch, and that's when my son pulled up. My wife quickly walked out the door past me and walked out to his car. My son got out with his wife and daughter and hugged her, and she helped him unload presents. I wasn't sure if I should walk up to him, so I just stayed on the porch and waited for him to come in. He came walking up to the porch holding his daughter, 1.5 years old. He looked up at me and said, "Dad," and then walked on by and inside. He sat on the right side of the room with his family, and I went and sat on the far left all the way across the room from him. I couldn't take my eyes off his daughter. She was beautiful and full of life, and my first grandchild. The party got going full speed, and there was a full house packed with family. Everyone was talking and exchanging gifts and laughing and eating, and it was a lot of fun. I stayed in my seat over on the far side of the room so I wouldn't crowd him or make him feel uncomfortable. Then my ex-wife from over by his side said to me, "Do you still have your hair?" I just smiled and lifted my baseball cap to show her that I wasn't yet bald like the rest of the family. It was the first sign of life I had gotten. A couple hours into it, and I could see that my son was staring at me. I figured he was mad at me for being there. Then he stood up and he walked over to me and stood there. So I stood up and we were almost face to face, and I was waiting for him to say what he had to say. And then I was going to leave. Instead, he reached out and grabbed me and gave me the biggest hug I've ever had in my life. Then he pushed over his cousins that were sitting next to me and made a spot for him to sit. And then we started talking and talking and talking. For the next 2 hours he caught me up on everything going on in his life. He said he missed me and that he was sorry that he hadn't been returning my calls. He told me that whenever he talked to me it reminded him of his brother and the way he died. It opened up the depression he had been fighting and felt like he was taken back to that day. He said it wasn't my fault, but it was something that he had to deal with. In the middle of our conversation I looked around and there was not a dry eye in the room. Everyone knew what we had been through and what had happened to our relationship. I can't explain the feelings that was going through me and the emotions that were threatening to overwhelm me. It was the best Christmas gift I could have ever asked for. He went and got his daughter and came and sat her on my lap. He formally introduced me and said she needs her granddaddy in her life. So I got to hold my granddaughter for the first time. Then his wife came up and he introduced her and we hugged and stared each other in the eyes for a minute. I told her I had heard a lot about her and that I was glad that she was with my son. A little while later my ex-wife came up to me and put her arm around me and told me that I looked good. Then she went back to being ice cold and walked back over to her chair and never said another word to me. I also didn't try to speak to her. I can't begin to tell you all the joy I feel about having my son back. I'm planning to go visit in the next couple of weeks. And I'm going to visit as often as this life allows and going to be a part of my granddaughters life no matter what. This has really changed my life and removed some of that guilt and bitterness that I've been living with for the past 10 years. I think things are going to be okay, and that's all that matters. I want to thank you all for your comments and advice and support. You guys really made a difference. When I first wrote my post, I wasn't sure what to expect. I felt like you were going to roast me and that I deserved it. I got nothing but encouragement instead, and good advice, and just a little bit bashed. I'm so glad I wrote that article. And for the guy that suggested I write a letter, I think that was what made the difference. Because he mentioned it and said he's been thinking about it for the past 2 weeks. So all in all, thank you, and I hope I can give some support in y'all's lives in the future. Comment from Oop. I was expecting the worst, so what I got was a blessing. I am not the Oop. I'm glad things are looking up for him. That's such a sad and unfair situation. I'd imagine there must have been a lot of trauma and fighting regarding the wife blaming him, and we don't know how messy the divorce may have been. But I can't wrap my head around the wife still treating him like that after all that time. It is terrible that they all blame him. Waking the kid up accidentally did not cause his death. It was the kid doing a job he wasn't prepared for, capable of doing. And being irresponsible by driving when tired when he could nap in a parking lot of his job for an hour. Or have a friend, coworker drive him. But that is the past. I am glad he maybe is finally healing. Oh okay. This is going to be my Reddit cry of the week. What a heartbreaking story. I wish nothing but the best for Oop. I'm sorry this is horrible and all, but wow. It was not his fault, and everyone left him blaming him. Losing someone suddenly like that makes you irrational. Oop never should have blamed himself for a moment. It was immeasurably cruel for his wife and son to heap guilt on top of grief. It just held everyone there, unable to heal for far too long. Wild how everyone just went with blaming this dad, when the son clearly chose to drive while drowsy time and again. I get that it's hard to blame the dead person, but that's more dangerous than driving drunk. And he did it regularly. The dad briefly waking him up one time does not make him responsible for his death. That was so hard to read. I wish all involved easier life ahead. They have suffered a lot. Jesus Christ. They blamed him and then literally abandoned him. Like WTH. I work nights, and let me tell you, it's not easy functioning with little sleep. My parents and sister would wake me up constantly. I would drive to work terrified I was going to fall asleep. But never once in my head did I think it was my family's fault. Just the idea of them heaping so much guilt onto him. It's clear he was just as upset as them. Even more then, instead of trying to be a support system, it's screw you goodbye. He's nicer than me. I wouldn't have freaking bothered trying to interact with them again. FK. Poor Oop getting treated as the lightning rod for everyone else's grief. Over a trivial thing, even if it might have been a factor in the tragic event. How grossly unfair. Monstrous, really. I wish him nothing but happiness. It's so sad that he lost 2 sons when the eldest died. Obviously this is a terrible situation, but does anyone kinda blame the ex-wife a bit for where she placed the blame and letting the living son blame his dad? In a situation like that, no one is really to blame. The family just self-destructed in its grief. I'm glad that, at least, it sounds like they're on their way to healing. My sister's first fiancé died in a similar fashion. Coming back from night shift, he failed to take a bend in the road and drove into a tree. He was killed in the crash. Initially he was thought to have been intoxicated, but his blood alcohol test came back clean. I feel so sorry for the father. Him disturbing his son was possibly not the cause of the accident anyway. But the guilt he felt was understandable. My niece died in her carrycot on a long drive from London to Aberdeen. She was 6 weeks old and was being taken to see her maternal grandparents for the first time. The car was stripped apart to see if carbon monoxide fumes had killed her. But it was eventually held that it was just another case of SIDS. I know my brother-in-law never drove to Aberdeen ever again when they had another daughter and took her up to meet her grandparents. They flew. Fuck, this one was a gut punch in the feels. So bittersweet in the end. I hurt for them all so much, but his son approaching him in the end had me full on in tears, and so happy for the two of them. I hope they continue to heal together and keep moving forward as family. I'm happy he reconnected and sad he lost so much time with his son. I am, however, confused by his ex-wife's behavior. Maybe she wants to move past it and be on friendly terms but still harbors resentment and guilt? These people do not know how sleep deprivation works. Shame they ruined their lives and shattered the guy's mental health. This is so sad. I would say a very sad thing is that the entire family didn't think it was an issue that the kid couldn't stay awake on the drive, and the solution was moving him a little closer and not figuring out some alternate solution. It's also not the dad's fault that the adult kid chose to go to work dangerously tired. But mostly it's so sad that the youngest son didn't talk to his dad for 10 years. I can't even fathom holding a grudge so long for something as simple as waking someone up once. I know they all suffered a great tragedy, but I think it's a disgrace they blamed the dad and kept up that blame for 10 years. Letting that poor man suffer like that is terrible. Goodness me, this is absolutely heartbreaking. You can feel the grief and pain in OOP's heart through the words. It can be illogical, but in the midst of the pain you find yourself looking for something. Anything to blame. I wish him luck in mending the broken bond between him and his son. I guess I'm glad Oop is getting what he dearly wished for. But it feels bitter to me how they ruined his life. Kept him away for 10 years. Blamed him for his child's death, and now they're being civil without really apologizing for what they did to Oop. Just some weak, "Oh, talking to you made me sad" excuses. I looked around and there was not a dry eye in the room. Here, too, buddy. Here, too.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epicaricast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.